Cheat Code, Support Strategist by myheadinthecoudsnotcomingdown. Read by Rat Overlord. Chapter 25. Strength. Summary. The students deal with the aftermath of the USJ. On one hand, Isuku probably shouldn't have snuck out of the house at dawn to get to UA early and work on the analysis packets for the hero course. On the other, May was already in the lab when he arrived, so it couldn't be too bad. Making up for lost time? Isuku laughed when he saw her. If you missed inventing so much, you should have just taken me up on my offer yesterday. Oh, shut up, Izuku! May swatted at him, but Isuku simply grinned and sidestepped as she continued to grumble. It's not like breaking in when the security was down for improvements would even be that much of a challenge anyways. Isuku raised an eyebrow. Are you saying you want to break in another day? Maybe test their new defenses? May's eyes widened. Do you think Netsu would give us permission? I can make so many babies for it, and you can practice your hacking, and can you ask him? Maybe after the sports festival. Isuku laughed. But don't you still have to fine-tune your support items for that? And we both still have to help Shinso get ready. Is that why you're here so early? May asked. Preparing for the sports festival? No. Isuku rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I couldn't sleep. May looked at him with pity and a level of understanding that made Isuku feel slightly guilty. Me either. Nightmares? Isuku sighed and nodded. I wanted to come in and maybe get an abbreviated packet done for each of the students. If they'd had them a few days ago... They still wouldn't have had time to implement your suggestions, May interrupted. You know that, right? I know, but... Isuku groaned in frustration. But I just can't help but wonder. Maybe if their support items were better, then maybe they wouldn't have had to go through that, May finished. It threw Isuku for a loop, but for the first time since he'd arrived, he actually looked at the invention that she was currently working on. It was something like a taser, but didn't have a power source, meaning that it was most likely designed for someone with an electricity quirk, one that the user couldn't consciously direct or control. Isuku saw a stack of blueprints under that one, and he guessed that if he looked through them, he'd see one for most of the members of Class 1A, maybe some for 1B as well. You couldn't sleep either. I just need to make sure that they have the best babies that they can. May said it like it was all there was to do. But even though he really hadn't known her for long, Isuku could hear that she was using pragmatism to hide the tangled mess of emotions underneath. Isn't that what a support engineer does? Gives a hero their best chance, they said together, then ended up laughing. We're a mess, aren't we? May asked. Yeah, a little, Isuku said. But hey, where's the fun without chaos, you know? I'll be in my workroom if you need me. I still have that blanket if you need it. Isuku felt slightly hot and figured that it was probably from the lack of good sleep. May nodded and turned back to her newest baby. It probably won't do much good, but thanks. Isuku nodded and left towards his room when May spoke again. Thank you, she said softly. I don't know what I'd do without you, Isuku. Isuku smiled softly. Me either. He left his door cracked open, and they spent the time before classmates arrived in companionable silence, working on their own projects. Shoto sat in the back row, half listening to his classmates talk about the USJ attack while mostly lost in his own thoughts. When the villains had shown up, he had been mostly just annoyed? Was that the right word? But it was expected, wasn't it? Villains attacked heroes. It was what they did. It made sense. But what didn't make sense had been the mysterious third party that had some intent on helping them. Isuku wasn't the only one curious either if his classmates' before-class conversation were anything to go by. It was honestly kind of freaky, Ojiro told Hagakure, who seemed to be hanging on to his every word. It was like the buildings came alive all of a sudden, and the fire was on my side. Every time I started going in the wrong direction, it would block my path, and I'd catch any villain trying to sneak up on me before they even had a chance. It was creepy, but in a cool way, if that makes sense.
Cheat code is a force of darkness,
Tokoyami said seriously.
I cannot describe my experience in any other words than as if it were a benevolent, supernatural entity that was haunting the rain itself and bending it at their will. Shut up about that fucking coward!
Bakugo exploded and glared at everyone.
If this cheat code fucker really wanted to help, he should have shown up in person rather than hiding behind a microphone like a shitty little scared sheep. And he shouldn't have let us destroy those damn villains!
Oh, come on, Baka bro. You gotta admit, that was kind of manly how he protected us like that. Kirishima hit his fists together with a grin.
I want to meet him!
And that was another weird thing, wasn't it? Everyone else who had ended up caught in the zones had said that the buildings kept fighting them until the very end unless they headed towards the entrance. But cheat code had allowed Shoto to get close enough to save Aizawa. Why him? Why not Kirishima, who was arguably kinder and more likely to listen? Was it just because Shoto had a powerful quirk? But Bakugo was powerful enough to fight as well, so if it was just about power, he should have been allowed to reach the plaza as well. If it was about effectiveness in rescuing, wouldn't Uraraka have been a better fit? She wanted to be a rescue hero, and she could have floated Aizawa-sensei out of there. So, what made Shoto different? Why choose him out of all of his classmates? Apparently, that was a question for another day, because Aizawa chose that exact moment to walk in. One of his arms was in a thick cast, and there was a large piece of gauze taped underneath his eye. But, overall, he seemed a lot less injured than Todoroki had expected. He flinched as the class erupted into loud cheers.
Aizawa-sensei! You're all right?
Ashido exclaimed loudly.
We were so worried when we saw Todoroki leading you out! It's fine.
Aizawa interrupted.
It would have been a lot worse if the villain's attention had been on me, or if Shigaraki had managed to hit me with his quirk. But, as it was, the old lady was able to heal most of it.
Is 13-sensei? Uraraka asked, worried.
They're still in recovery,
Aizawa said.
Let that be a lesson to you to always be aware of your surroundings. Quirks are dangerous, even and especially your own. Always expect someone to use every weakness against you. You got lucky this time. The thugs that the League of Villains sent were primarily low level, and cheat code managed to protect most of you from the inner circle. But when you get out into the streets, you're going to meet villains who are prepared to do whatever it takes to kill you. If you are not prepared for that, leave now.
Nobody left. Not that Shoto was surprised. It probably hadn't even really hit him yet, he supposed. Shoto didn't leave either. His father could have killed him hundreds of times over if he wasn't so worried about losing his masterpiece, so Shoto was used to the threat of death. Not to mention that the threat of death would become that much more real if he were to refuse to be a hero.
Speaking of cheat code,
Tsu said tentatively,
who is he?
Aizawa sighed and muttered something that sounded more like, problem child, before addressing the class.
He's an analyst.
Kaminari and Ashido had tried to interrupt, probably to whine and beg for more information, but Aizawa simply silenced them with a glare, and Todoroki couldn't help but notice that he didn't activate his quirk like he normally would, which meant that he must not be completely healed yet.
He's an analyst, and that is all the information you will be getting. The UA staff has decided to keep his identity under wraps to protect him for now, since I think you each can understand why we wouldn't want the villains to get their hands on him. So, no, I will not be telling you who he is. Maybe he'll tell you himself eventually, but until then, you'll have to deal with your curiosity. However,
Aizawa used his good arm to pull a stack of papers out from his capture weapon.
He did stupidly decide to be an overachiever and give you these. Come up when I call your name.
The room instantly dissolved into whispers as Aizawa called up Aoyama and handed him a few papers. He read through them and swore softly in French as the other members of the class were called up. When Shoto's name was called, he received a packet with 2 papers stapled together. The first section gave a brief description of his quirk, while the next section gave bulleted lists of strengths and weaknesses, suggestions for improvement. At the end was an imprinted sticker with some kind of logo and cheat code's name.
These are abbreviated analyses of your quirks and fighting styles,
Aizawa explained once all the packets had been handed out.
You'll apparently be receiving full versions near the end of the semester once cheat code has had more of a chance to see you in action. He went to Nedzu early this morning, however, and insisted that we give you these. Use them wisely. Analysts can be a hero's greatest ally or greatest enemy, depending on how you treat them.
Whoa, dude! Sarah yelled. These are awesome! There's more where these came from? That's super cool! More like super freaky, Minetta complained. How did this guy even know so much about us? The class looked towards Aizawa for an answer, only to find that he had already cocooned himself inside of a sleeping bag and was slumped against the wall asleep, so he'd be absolutely zero help. Shoto looked a little more closely at his packet and frowned as he read. Strengths: ice power, ice control, strategic thinking. Weaknesses: left side is open to attack, danger of hypothermia. Suggestions: use fire half of quirk. The analyst only had part of the picture, but that didn't make Shoto feel any less annoyed at yet another person telling him to use his fire. He didn't have to listen to someone. Shoto froze. Hadn't he decided to trust cheat code in part because Endeavor wouldn't have? Ignoring his advice completely would be exactly what Endeavor would do, but he still couldn't use his fire. There was a loud explosion, and Shoto looked up to see Bakugo throwing the remains of his smoking packet out the window. I don't fucking need this loser telling me what I already fucking know! I don't have impulsivity issues! Aizawa crawled out of his bag, grabbed another packet from his capture weapon, and slammed it down on Bakugo's desk.
He mentioned that you might do that. Be careful with that one. If you explode it, you won't be getting a third.
Bakugo reached for the papers, sparks already leaping across his palms, but Aizawa snatched the packet out of his reach. What the fuck, old man?
Bakugo,
Aizawa said sternly.
If you don't want to be a better hero, or a hero at all.
Bakugo huffed, but grabbed the papers without setting them on fire and slumped down into his seat, staring at the packet like it had personally offended him. Shoto could relate. If only we could actually meet this analyst person in person! Ida lamented loudly. I have a great many questions of how to improve my quirk's functions, and... Suit yourself, Jiro shivered. It was freaky enough knowing that he could make the ground collapse beneath us at any moment. My money's on him being even scarier in person.
What a mad banquet of darkness,
Tokoyami muttered. It had already been a long day by the time Hitoshi reached the gym after school and started stretching, considering that Midoriya was probably still trying to pull Hatsume away from whatever invention she was currently working on. Hanging out with the two yesterday had been fun, but his foster parents had yelled at him when he got home, accused him of going out and trying to join a gang, despite the fact that he tried telling him that he was going out with friends before he left. Too bad they wouldn't actually let him talk to them, or at all. And then, all everyone was talking about was the hero course. Those lucky students with the perfect quirks and everything laid out for them without having to fight tooth and nail to convince everyone that they deserved every chance that they did. Even his kidnappers had spent the day focused on them, which was annoying, even though he really didn't have a right to be angry considering that those two had been involved in the attack. At least they didn't think he was a villain. Yet. A slight sound behind him had Hitoshi jumping to his feet and whirling around to see an injured hobo nodding at him approvingly.
Nice situational awareness. You must be Cheat Code's extra credit project.
Oh no. Hitoshi froze as he realized this wasn't just any injured hobo. He was talking to Eraserhead! Eraserhead knew who he was? Hitoshi forced himself to snap out of his hero worship, for lack of a better word. Yes, sir. Eraserhead looked at him appraisingly.
You're doing physical training?
Yes, sir. Hitoshi nodded quickly. I'm mostly focusing on speed and flexibility for now, since I don't have a lot of time to gain strength before the sports festival,
but there will be time for that later if you get into the hero course.
Eraserhead finished.
Don't underestimate stealth, either. You'd be surprised how often it can come in handy.
Hitoshi's eyes went wide. Was Eraserhead really giving him advice? He didn't know what to say. What was someone supposed to say when their favorite hero just gave them tips? After a too long moment where Shinso was freaking out, Midoriya burst through the door, his jacket covered in some sort of oil that must have exploded from Hatsume's most recent experiment. Shinso! Sorry I'm late. Mei-chan. Eraserhead! I didn't know you'd... Eraserhead interrupted Midoriya's ramblings by bowing, and Midoriya instantly turned bright red and started sputtering. Oh, what? Eraserhead, sir, I don't know what.
You helped save my students.
Eraserhead straightened.
Thanking you is only logical.
Midoriya looked to Hitoshi helplessly, but he was still reeling from Eraserhead giving him advice. Midoriya turned back to Eraserhead and bowed back. I apologize for not doing more. Eraserhead snorted.
I knew you'd be a problem child. I don't know what else I expected.
He turned to leave, but stopped at the door and fixed Hitoshi with a look.
You have potential. Don't waste it. It's not going to be easy to claim the extra seat in my class.
The challenge was apparently what it took to snap Hitoshi out of his trance, and he couldn't help but smirking slightly.
It won't be easy to be a hero either, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it.
Eraserhead gave him a creepily wide grin and left, allowing the door to swing closed behind him. When he was sure that he was gone, Hitoshi deflated.
Midoriya, I think I just met someone even scarier than you are.
He ignored Midoriya's spluttering denials as he went back to stretching. He had a sports festival to win, after all.